All right, so I think we can kick this off now. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining our call. Lawrence and I are very excited to bring this presentation to you. It's going to be the first in a long series of educational videos that we want to bring to the market and kind of get our messaging across. Um, for those of you that don't know me, my name is George Geddes, and I'm the country manager for UK and Ireland for Telelink Business Services. There's a couple of slides that talk a little bit more about us as an organization. With me, I am pleased to to co-host this event with Lawrence. Lawrence is a certified Cyber Essentials consultant and auditor, and comes with a long line of experience in real situations that other companies can benefit from. So a little bit about Telelink. We've been in business for a very, very long time, and we have some very large customers as our clients. Some of those notable names like Lufthansa and Veolia and a few others as well. We have two main divisions in an organization. We have an IT infrastructure side of the business that manages everything from projects to help desk facilities to consultancy, and as we see the market, AI as well. We also have a cybersecurity division that focuses solely on cybersecurity, managed detection and response, services associated with making sure that organizations manage their risk and ensure that we as an organization help those organizations respond and detect and any other sort of services that they require from a cybersecurity perspective. So just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions, it is an interactive forum, so please just open up the Q&A tab at the top of the screen, post a question, and we'll either deal with it as we go along, or we will also have a Q&A at the very end. Also, for everybody that has joined today, we will offer a free cybersecurity posture assessment. It is quite an in-depth report on a hacker's view on how they see your public-facing assets. So it is a very valuable sort of report to help an organization kind of understand what the hacker's view is from the outside. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Lawrence. And Lawrence, if you could take us through the bulk of the presentation, please.
Cool, thank you, George. So we're going to look at a couple of aspects around a real case as an organization being a victim of an attack, and areas you can look at to help prevent this and reduce your risk. So starting off, just a cybersecurity landscape of a moment. That by the start of the next decade, ransomware activity alone is projected to cost victims up to £200 billion annually. Activity surged 50% year on year during the first half of 2023. You could get these Ransomware-as-a-Service kits. You pay like £40 and get a basic attack kit. So these attacks are getting quicker and easier to do. As an example, the number of days it used to take for a successful attack in 2019 was 60 days. Now it's down to just 4. So when a vulnerability arises, people can jump on it very quickly and take advantage of that. Part of that is coming down to AI adoption, as already been mentioned there. There's benefits on both sides. So attackers using things like ChatGPT to help write code, generative AI can help less proficient threat actors create new strains and variations of existing ransomware. And obviously on the protective side, AI is coming into it. So we're seeing that in all sorts of different security products out there now to help combat. It's an arms race, isn't it? We're also seeing like a rise in the use of mobile devices, and there's coming off the back of that, there's a rise in the poor security practices because people using personal devices aren't necessarily following the same practices as corporate devices out there. It's even things just like using public Wi-Fi without being aware of what you're connecting to, and the data that gets published on social media being used. There's a lot of additional risk coming from this increase in personal and mobile devices being out there. And on the other side, there is a security skills shortage. So even though the attacks are massively on the rise, the people who are defending against it isn't rising as quickly. So it's saying that the current global cybersecurity workforce gap is more than 4 million people, with demand growing twice as fast as supply. So there's a lot of demand out there for these services to help defend you. And the key background of how to defend yourself, it's all about early detection. Preventing a cyber attack is getting harder and the stakes are getting higher. As a result, early detection response capabilities are the key tools to becoming more important. This side of it is also backed by AI, helping to catch these things earlier, spot unusual activity, etc. And these companies that aren't looking at early detection, this is where you're at a greater risk. So it's all about that. Detection is key. I'm going to show you an example. So one of my colleagues, Adam, he can't be here today, so I'm doing this on his behalf. He's got a really good example of a real case. So Adam, as a bit of background, he was a detective sergeant leading covert operations and cybercrimes teams. Had 15 years in law enforcement, and then since 2016 has been working in cybersecurity. And a key part of what he does is conveying the right messages to senior leaders and end users on what they need to do to prevent themselves being a victim. So this case, let's say one he investigated, and it gives a good example of various aspects of where there were weaknesses in the processes of the detection and led to this. So the actual investigation. The initial report to police was minimal in detail. An email was received by the entire company from the CEO. The email was derogatory about an individual member of staff. The email was particularly rude and vicious towards an individual, with clearly not sent from the CEO. The message was signed off with the phrase, "your friendly CEO," which is not a phrase that CEO would use. The CEO was now locked out of her account. An internal investigation had been commenced by an outsourced IT provider. The company were in a state of panic as they did not know who was attacking them, why, how they'd have their emails, CEO's email, and if there was more to come. Within a few days, the internal investigation had revealed the following. It identified that an admin account had been used to reset the CEO's password. That admin account was not an officially recorded account and had been created over a year before. The IP address used by the admin account was shown as an O2 cellular IP address. Additionally, historical email was recovered and had been sent by the ex-IT manager using the phrase, "your friendly IT manager." So we've got suspects. The only people with admin access now and historically were the ex-IT manager, the CEO, and the current outsourced IT provider. There is nobody with a known motive to want to cause harm to his CEO of a business. The IT manager had left his role 2 months prior. The CEO advised that the IT manager's departure was difficult, and although a mutual decision, it was a case of jump or be pushed. CEO discussed many instances of strange events in which the IT manager was involved. This even included a burglary some years ago in which the IT manager had been on the site at the time. Although no wrongdoing was found, there was always a sense of distrust. So the police... sorry.
Lawrence. That's a very interesting point. Apparently, there's a study that came out that about 47% of attacks are down to insider threats and disgruntled employees. So a lot of organizations don't really know or hear or see some of these attacks. In fact, it takes about 194 days on average for an organization to detect some sort of a breach. So it is an area of growing concern for a lot of organizations. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's cool. And it's definitely rise. We've seen an increase in people looking for DLP solutions to help with this insider threat. And it is a case here that, as it was mentioned, this admin account was one that wasn't known about by the company. It had been there for over a year. So that threat had been there for a year and nobody had picked up on it. In theory, should have been a process there to manage it. But yeah, we'll get to a police investigation. Adam focused his initial investigation on the IT manager. Obviously, situation looked like he was a prime suspect. He identified a phone number from him, from the company, obtained data from it. The phone number was still actively used and paid for by the IT manager, and it was on the O2 network. He looked at the business accounts that the IT manager had legitimate access to while in his role. He could see that he'd been logging in from his home address, as well as using IPs from the O2 network. Logins were at all times of day and night, suggesting that it wasn't always work-related. And a significant amount of orders had been placed over time. And upon further inquiries, found that although used in a business account and business funds, the orders were not for work. Orders were for high-value hardware, such as GPUs for over £1,000. There's no audit trail for where these items could be located. One particular order caught Adam's attention, as it was for a delivery to the office on a Saturday when the offices were closed. The on-site security guard took possession and signed for the order. An audit of the security logbook showed that the IT manager had left his mobile number with the security guard and asked that he be called when the order arrived. The security guard had called the IT manager and it had been logged that the parcel had been collected later that day by the IT manager. So, Adam now has his suspect. One prime suspect being the ex-IT manager. Recently left the company on relatively bad terms. He had the capability to create the additional admin account as he already had admin access. The IT manager had access to an O2 phone, which tied in with the attacker's O2 IP usage, as well as the habits he has shown when accessing business cloud accounts. The IT manager demonstrated his dishonest character when purchasing additional equipment. So the investigation revealed some key points for a company that showed flaws in the way they worked, some of them which required immediate remediation. The IT manager still had access to the company network, which was actively in use and not detected. There were no controls in place to flag unusual activity, such as external access to the network outside working hours. That admin account existed for over a year without being identified. A privileged account sat dormant for over 12 months without being recognised, which is what we were just saying about that insider threat and the timescales involved. With basically any attack, they will often sit unknown for a long time gathering information before any action is taken. So these, what was it, 194 days, you said?
It varies depending on who's actually collected the data, but on average it's between 195 and 230 days.
Yeah. So
that's that's a whole year undetected. And generally, in most cases, it's usually an outside source that reveals the data. So it could be a case that a customer says, by the way, I've received this unusual email from you guys. Generally organizations don't have the systems and the processes and the policies in place to ensure early detection and responses from that perspective.
And again, the next point here is there was a lack of policies and procedures. So expenditure not being accounted for and offboarding not being completed. So one of the key things here is that the admin account that had been created wasn't being monitored, so people weren't aware, and they didn't have a policy in place to review these and make sure that only the correct accounts existed. And when the IT manager left, there wasn't a proper offboarding process, so his account was still left working anyway. So the outcome, obviously, expecting to say they arrested the suspect, put overwhelming evidence to him, and this has been convicted, never to work as an IT manager again, but unfortunately not. company decided not to take any action as they didn't want the case to be public and go to court for them to receive a bad publicity for their lack of controls on IT security. There's an element, obviously, here. Company reputation is key for a lot of these things. And you see large companies, when they do get attacked and it goes into the press, there's a lot of negative publicity there. But for smaller companies, it can have an even bigger effect, because there's a stat out there that around 60% of SMEs that are a victim to a cybersecurity attack eventually go out of business because of it. And having that lack of trust in managing data because you've been a victim can be a big issue. So understand why they took this decision, even though, as Adam says, he doesn't agree with it. The company protected their interests but failed to protect others. They also may not know the full extent of what he had been doing, or if he's been working with anyone else within the company. And ultimately it means that this IT manager has a clean record and is available to hire. So he could still be out there working for somebody else and doing the same thing, and it's not been officially recorded because they decided not to take that action. And his final point on this was, most intriguingly, why did he do it? Spite or money? And this is where stats come in. Although we'll never know the specifics of what this IT manager was thinking, we've got stats to shine a light on what senior leaders within UK SMEs may be thinking. So part of this is moving on to a survey commissioned by Cybersmart of 1,000 senior leaders and decision makers from UK SMEs. There is a blog that they published on this as well. We wanted to understand the cost of living crisis and how it affected SMEs. And it says nearly half of SMEs believe they are at greater risk of a cyber attack since the cost of living crisis. 40% of employee salaries have stayed the same or reduced. 1 in 5 small businesses are either worried about survival of their business or expected to make a significant pivot to survive. Unexpectedly, businesses are feeling restrained financially and are aware that financial decisions could now affect their cybersecurity later. So we asked, since the start of the economic crisis, are you at greater risk of malicious or negligent insider threats? And 73% said yes. We dug into this a little further and found that 17% believe employees will seek harm to the company's reputation due to resentment over salary cuts and layoffs. 20% believe employees will steal data from the company to sell. And 22% believe that employees will be more likely to make mistakes, such as clicking on a phishing link. These stats demonstrate there's a real lack of trust. And for those of you aware so this bit is an Adam bit that I'm not 100% familiar with, but it says Douglas McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. So you can see how this may become a self-fulfilling prophecy, which I can understand from what is written here as well. If you believe that these things are going to happen, more likely to be even subconsciously taking action that may actually trigger them to happen. So
See, I find those statistics very interesting, because on a day-to-day basis, I speak to hundreds of customers, and the SME market tends to view cybersecurity investment as an insurance policy that they may or may not cash in on. I usually get things like, "Oh, we're too small, we can't be a target." A lot of companies don't see the value of investing in cybersecurity. And part of the problem we have in the UK market is that we need to change the mindset of that SME market. They account for the biggest share of organizations in the UK. And also, even when they know that there's statistics like this out there, they still don't see the value in investing in cybersecurity. The other common misconception is that security is for large enterprise organizations. When we know now, most security vendors, organizations have services that are geared towards that market and priced for that market. So there's a lot of misconceptions out in the UK market in terms of investment in cybersecurity and the best ways to move forward with it on a cost-effective way.
Yeah. There's something that's just been published recently, which I don't have in my slide deck, but I'll mention it towards the end properly. There is more government information coming out on. They're focusing more on trying to get SMEs interested in this now. So I'll in a follow-up we can send a link to it as well as a report on how effective basic controls can be. The positive effect it's been having. So we'll see a lot more from the government pushing towards this understanding as well. So on this survey, we've also got other interesting information on business leaders themselves. And we've got these crazy stats. So asking the senior leaders and decision makers, would you engage in bribery? And 7% said yes. Would you engage on a cyber attack on a rival? And 10% said yes, they would as well. And would you commit fraud? 15% yes. These are all based on, would you do these things basically to save your business? But each one of these is a criminal act that could see you spending 10 years in prison. It says that, I remind you that these are senior people within SMEs risking a decade in prison by doing these acts. So it comes from both sides. You've got this the information here saying that there's risk from your sort of standard workers and people having their own stresses against the cost of living crisis, but business leaders themselves can also be a risk. And you've got to wonder with, let's say, this IT manager, where his motive came from. But there are strategies to prevent all of this. And as George was just saying, it's all about this education of SMEs to make sure that we've got this mindset that the basic things can be put in place, and it's not just almost an afterthought or an insurance policy. There's standard things you can be doing to help improve your security massively just by doing some sort of standard basic things. So basic strategies of what can be done: employee training and awareness. So looking at the people, make sure that employees are trained about the types of insider threats and how to recognize and report suspicious behavior. So as we saw earlier, 22% of leaders saw clicking on links within emails as a threat. So providing training on that, phish testing, and awareness on what they should and shouldn't be doing there. Promoting good cyber hygiene. So strong and unique passwords, reportings of locking workstations when you're not actually at them. One thing that on the locking that people do forget quite often is if you're working at home, there's still a risk. You should still be locking your device if you're going away from it, even if you're just at home with your family. Anything else could happen while you're there. So it's always just wherever you are, lock your device when you're not using it. You've also got access controls and monitoring. Implement principle of least privilege, granting employees access only to the information and systems necessary for their job roles. It's another area we see where people have got access to things that they shouldn't have. And it's either a case of being granted accidentally or it's just something they no longer require access to, but there isn't a process in place to manage this and make sure that their roles are updated and kept in line with what they actually need to do. And these need to be audited regularly to make sure they're actually effective. We need clear policies and procedures so that people have clear guidelines and are accountable for actions. This in itself creates trust. We know what's right and wrong, and it's vital to include an incident response procedure when an accident happens and include an emergency communications plan. In the investigation conducted, this would have streamlined a lot of the initial decision making, allowed full focus to be on the incident at hand. We need and some final stats. So we know the cost of living crisis is impacting businesses and employees. Business leaders we've spoken to show a willingness to break the law, but interestingly view their staff with a clear lack of trust, seen them as greatest risk to a cyber attack. The case investigated is one of many such incidences when a lack of policy and procedure left a business exposed. And implementing basic controls will ensure that businesses are safeguarded from significant amount of threats. Surveys showed that sorry, I jumped ahead. Surveys showed that half of businesses increasing their investment in cybersecurity since the cost of living crisis. 13% of companies have no policies in place at all for offboarding of former employees. 76% of companies that recognise former employees as a threat have no clear offboarding policies and procedures. SMEs are willing to spend money, but understand there's a risk. The opportunity is there. We just need to offer our support and guidance and implement the correct measures. So if we could support businesses, everyone's risk is reduced and trust is improved among the staff as well. So I think
So at this point, I just launched a quick survey poll just to kind of understand what people's understanding is of the next bit of the topic. Greatly appreciated if you could respond, and then we can move on to the next slide. So I'll give it a minute here for the responses, Lawrence, and then we can move on.
Cool.
And we can have a quick chat about that at the end as well. Right, so the responses are in. Lawrence, if we can move on to the next slide, please.
Cool. So yeah, what is Cyber Essentials? So Cyber Essentials is a government certification based on a recommended minimum standard of security for any business. There's a couple of ways of looking at it, but a nice easy one is thinking of it a bit like an MOT for a car. There is a set of safety checks. It's done once a year, and you get a certificate to say that everything is fine. But this is looking at getting these sort of basic areas in place and also maintaining them. So it is based on the idea of these policies and procedures. So as we mentioned, these companies not having an offboarding policy, that is part of your Cyber Essentials journey. Going through Cyber Essentials, it's there to get the basics in place. It's the start of your cybersecurity journey, and you build on top of it. It will enhance knowledge of your own security and where strengths and weaknesses lay, and open your eyes to the reality of threats that businesses face. Because, as we said, there's a belief out there from a lot of smaller companies that they're not going to be a victim because they're not big enough to be a target. But that's unfortunately not how things work. Cyber Essentials also helps you understand the assets, how they're critical to your business, and make you think about how your business would cope without them, whether that's for a few hours or days or weeks. So yeah, it was created 2014 as a solid foundation for cybersecurity. As I said, it's the minimum standards that business should be doing to protect themselves. You get a certificate off the back of it, and that is publicly available information as well. So it's something that you can use to demonstrate your commitment to cybersecurity, and is often required in a lot of contracts as well now. So we're seeing in more and more of the companies are required to have Cyber Essentials to continue doing business. There's a review from last year. So 2023, a total of 141,712 Cyber Essentials certificates have been awarded since the scheme began. The scheme is proving its efficacy too, with data suggesting that 80% of fewer cyber insurance claims are made with Cyber Essentials in place, which is a vast improvement. And it's increasing year on year. So we've seen a 21% increase in certificates last year and 55% increase in Cyber Essentials Plus. So Cyber Essentials Plus is where you have an audit. So your standard Cyber Essentials is basically a survey to fill in and have assessed. Cyber Essentials Plus, you have an audit to come out and check that everything you've described is actually working correctly. A large proportion of Cyber Essentials customers, 62%, report having learned something new about cybersecurity from implementing the controls. So it looks at these key areas. As I said, it's kind of like an MOT, so it's looking at security over as an annual check. Controls are based around 5 key areas and having policies or procedures to manage and back them up. For example, you must have a written password policy. So there are requirements on password complexity, but also how passwords are managed, reset, and reported if they believe it being breached in some way. So you have to have a written document managing that. But you're also supposed to actually follow up with, say, password management tools. So when you have this requirement for complex passwords that don't use dictionary words, etc., that's something that people aren't naturally good at coping with themselves because it's just not how the brain works. So password management tool is the solution to actually manage this correctly. And there's also elements of educating users off the back of it. So each of these areas that are put into place, there is an element that users need to be trained on it as well. So why password policies exist. Phish testing, as we mentioned, there's that risk of clicking on links. So people need to be aware of what a phishing email looks like and what not to do or how to report it. The key areas that are looking at for Cyber Essentials are these. So broken down into just simply, is your internet connection secure? If you've got firewalls. Have the most secure settings switched on for every computer. So things like autoplay being disabled. And having control over who has access to data and services. So this is, as we talked about that example there, they had accounts that were accessing data that they shouldn't have been able to do because this was not controlled and there was no policy to manage it. An obvious one, which most people probably do notice or have something in place of as a basic level at least, is protection against viruses and malware. That's a key one that I think everyone's aware of. And updates. Device and software updates are one of the key ones that doesn't always get thought about, but it has a massive effect. And it's one of those areas that if you could only do one thing to keep yourself secure, updates would probably be the first one. Because this is the case of when a vulnerability is discovered, the vendor will release a patch to fix it. But the longer you leave it, the more you're leaving yourself open to risk. And as that stat towards the beginning, we show that the time taken for a successful attack to be created has dropped from 60 to 4 days. It means getting those patches out as quick as possible is key. So just as I mentioned, there's 2 levels to Cyber Essentials. So standard one is a self-assessment, and that can be supported by cyber auditors to help you achieve the baseline standard. And then you've also got the plus level as well. So this is where you have completed your initial assessment and you have the written documentation, and then an auditor will want to see what you've got in place and confirm it is working and effective. That obviously gives you a higher standard of certification, and again, is often required for certain contracts. So if you're doing anything that, say, if you work with the Ministry of Defence or in finance, etc., we're seeing it a lot now, you'll be asked to have Cyber Essentials Plus as just part of the process. So over time, Cyber Essentials has evolved as well. So obviously threats have changed. The Cyber Essentials evolves to meet it as well. So there was a major update in 2022. No change up until April next year, where there's a refresh in what's going on as well. One of the things that, as I mentioned, have come back to now is that there is a new report that came out from the government just in the last couple of weeks. We'll be able to send a follow-up link to it, which has shown the benefits of Cyber Essentials out there, and there's a distinct uplift in the security of organizations and reduction in successful attacks from having Cyber Essentials out there as a baseline. And it's an indication there's been some other call to actions recently where they're looking at implementing Cyber Essentials as just a standard baseline for any company. So we're seeing a lot more from the government in trying to get this message out there and get the understanding that you need to do something to make yourself secure. So we'll send a link to that report. So benefits of having Cyber Essentials are this reduction in risk. So first of all, by doing it, you enhance your basic security. You'll be you've got this list of getting your sort of standard areas in place. You'll have that improve security, you'll be more aware of any threats that are out there, and you'll know where to go next if you need to improve beyond that. So if it is the case you started with Cyber Essentials, but then you have an opportunity that requires Cyber Essentials Plus, it's much easier for you to be able to get up to that next level. And it also starts to help if you want to move towards other certifications as well. Things like 27001 is very policy and procedure based, and Cyber Essentials is already a start towards that as well. It can give you a competitive advantage as well. So just having Cyber Essentials is a bonus whenever you're working with somebody, because it shows that you're taking your security seriously. There's even an element that you may miss out on business you're unaware of because you don't have a certificate. I have seen recently 2 examples where a company has been looking for someone to work with, and when they're getting ready to send out for quotes, they're actually checking the ISB database first to see if they have Cyber Essentials. If they don't, they're not even in the running anymore. So you could potentially, if you don't have a certificate, you could potentially lose out on business you're not even aware of because someone searched you don't have Cyber Essentials, you're not an option. So let me just check if I need to cover this bit. Yeah. So we'll send a list of these reports or links, sorry. But the general thing is the quickest and most effective means to mitigating risks is to receive these basic Cyber Essential certifications. It gets you your initial scope in place straight away, and you can build on top of that to increase your overall security. And it's aimed at anybody, so it's wide-ranging. If one-man bands up to enterprise can all benefit from having Cyber Essentials. It's all been driven by this idea that it's people who want to show they're taking security seriously, companies who want to improve their security posture to reduce chance of a risk, and proactively, because you don't want to be in a place where you have already been attacked and you're scrabbling to fix things and recover and then put the security in place because you've already lost out. And as said, there is a stat which again is in these reports actually. It shows that 60% of SMEs victim of an attack got out of business within, I think it's 3 years, due to that attack. We see that supply chain driven, increasingly required for tender submissions. The companies we work with, NHS, MOD, like I said, we've seen a lot more to do with finance and insurance, and also we've seen this reduction with insurance. So either insurance companies asking for Cyber Essentials or the same controls when you want to get a policy, or you get any reduction in your costs because of having Cyber Essentials in place and being at a lower risk. So yeah, you've got these like this overview here. So key reasons to get it: enhances security, legal and regulatory compliance, competitive advantage. You've got that additional trust and credibility for everyone you work with. Your data protection. Cyber Essentials is a cost-effective way of getting your security in place. Insurance and liability benefits, supply chain. Also, that proactive approach to your incident response, which again is part of a policy and procedure side of things, and our customer confidence side as well. So there's a lot of benefits just to getting this basic certification in place. I'll go over quickly the process of getting it, just to give you an idea of how it works. So the standard is a self-assessment. So the idea is you have a question set saying, do you have, say, anti-malware in place? And you've got to say, yes, we do. This is what we use. But we'll ask you things like, as I mentioned, password policy. We'll ask about a written password policy and to describe that and how you manage it. So the idea is to go through these question set, answering everything on there, and then having somebody assess it to see if you're doing the right stuff and if your answers make sense. It is done initially as a point in time, so you've got this idea that you do the certificate, and again, like an MOT, you get it on the day. Well, it doesn't mean that you are maintaining that level of compliance. So in 3 months' time, things can change, can drift, and you might not even be aware of it. So there's ways to manage this as well. So CyberSmart, as one of the the reasons we're here talking about this, they have additional support and tools to help. So going through somebody like TBS here, you've got the support to get everything in place and get you through that initial part of the process. The Cybersecurity team are there to help with the specifics in compliance and any unusual situations. If it doesn't seem like there's a natural way to be able to be Cyber Essentials compliant, having access to the audit team, such as Adam, gives you that additional level of support to get you through and get you secure. And they also offer a better level of submission. So standardized with process. Oops, managed to go back a slide. If you don't pass first time, you only have 2 working days. Cybers will allow you to go through that with basically unlimited submission process because they handle their assessments internally. Once that certificate is issued, it's valid for 12 months. And it is based on that idea of maintaining compliance. So all those answers you put into the survey are based on, we have a procedure to manage this and make sure it's effective. The longer term idea is to have processes and tools in place that manage this. So when you've got things like awareness training to help with a backup of the understanding, that should be a regular thing. I've seen places that only do it once a year. Really, you should be doing it at least monthly, stuff like that, just to keep things fresh and people understanding. And Cybersecurity offer tools to help with this as well. So with partners like TBS, we can offer ongoing compliance and an ongoing process to make sure that you're compliant at any time throughout the year. And then when you want to move up from Cyber Essentials, you've got the Plus as your audit submission. This is on-site or remotely. Most often these days, it's remotely. Obviously, a couple of years ago, something happened where people were all working from home and remote scans came in. So all these audits tend to be remotely now. The basic idea is they look at that document was submitted and then they want to see that, okay, you said you do this, show me it working. And once they're happy that everything you've described is working and compliant, you get this enhanced certificate. There is a requirement that it's completed within 3 months of your initial certificate, so that there's scope hasn't changed too much because you might have new devices, etc., out there, but it won't be too different from your initial submission. The audit process is a significant step up, and this can add additional cost or significant additional cost depending on the size of the overall audit, but it comes down to that security level and the reduction in your own risk and potential additional business if you're working with companies who require it. As I mentioned, you don't have to stop with just Cyber Essentials. There's this idea, so Cybers will have their tool Active Protect. So this will sit on all your endpoints, Windows, Mac, iPhone, and Android, and it's all based on this idea of continuous compliance. So once you have your certificate in place, you've got a tool that alerts you if something changes and needs attention. This will also help with the policy creation and management. So if those written documents aren't already in place, there's ways to help create that as well. And the longer term idea now is that if you do basic Cyber Essentials, you've got a reduction in risk. But it's only going to work if you're actually maintaining that and keeping on top of everything that's required. This is just one of the ways out there that you can do that rather than relying on manual processes. Automate as much as possible, get a report in if something needs attention, and then it can be dealt with. And we do see that by going these kind of routes, you get an even greater reduction in risk. So you can be looking at things as much as, so standard Cyber Essentials, the aim is to have an 80% reduction in risk against common attacks. Going through Cyber Essentials with CyberSmart, we've seen reductions of over 99% as a reported stat on that. So it can be very effective. Yeah, there's a little bit on the NCC annual review, which from last year, it should be a new one soon, actually, because it was end of the year. But we are seeing these massive increases. So it says between September 2022 and August 2023, NCSC received 297 reports of ransomware activity. And the report made the observations that ransomware attacks are rising, organizations are not following NCSC advice, such as getting cyber essentials. And success for criminals is usually down to poor cyber hygiene because people have been clicking on phishing links or have weak passwords. This year, the NCSC received 2005 reports. So that's a massive increase in the number of ransomware reports coming through. 4 of them were amongst the most severe incidents the NCSC had ever had to manage. Using their automated early warning service, the NCSC issued 24.48 million notifications informing organisations they were experiencing a cyber incident. The early warning system is a threat notification service for the NCSC that informs organisations about potentially suspicious activity. So National Cybersecurity Centre. So they obviously monitor all this stuff and they publish these reports, and we're seeing that there is a massive increase year on year. 18.5% increase in the amount of extortion of data, with 327 incidents being reported. So yeah, we're seeing this highlighting the increased need to protect our data, and it's all about getting these initial basics in place to prevent and detect as early as possible anything happening before it becomes an actual problem, and yeah, prevention better than the cure, kind of thing. Key bits, it always comes down to it's that cyber hygiene, secure passwords, MFA, being aware of phishing, etc., and being careful about what data you publish out there as well. Cool. So for me, that covers my main bits now. So we've done an example case, cyber essentials and the benefits of it, and information around that. So just back to George.
Thanks, Lawrence. So we are coming to the end of the presentation. If there are any sort of questions that need to be asked, this is the time to do it. And while you're posting those questions, so everybody who's attended will receive a free cybersecurity posture assessment, which I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation. It is an in-depth report, a tangible report with a lot of very useful information about how a potential threat actor sees your organization's public-facing assets. So over the next couple of days, I will be reaching out to see if you want to take advantage of that. As mentioned, it's absolutely free. There is no investment from your side, not even from a time perspective, other than filling out the form to authorize us to be able to do the testing. So my advice is please take advantage of it, and just kind of give yourself that peace of mind in terms of how secure your organization is from the outside view. Thank you very much for attending. Lawrence, thank you very much for the presentation, and also TBS. We covered a lot of this through the presentation, but we focus on all aspects of IT and cybersecurity. So if there are any sort of questions that you might have, we do have access to a security operations center that has various levels of expertise in terms of advice. Please reach out to me, and we can arrange a call for you to kind of have these discussions with some of the more technical people, and see if we can offer you any sort of support through what could potentially be a very trying cybersecurity time in the next few years. I don't see we have any questions. So at this point, I think I'll say thank you very much for everybody attending, and I'll be in touch very shortly.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.